Ladies and gentlemen, permit me, please, to claim your attention for a moment.
When I first mentioned the Second World War, animation isn't the first thing that springs to mind. You think Hitler, the Nazi Party, Churchill, D-Day, and the Holocaust. Propaganda during World War II was everywhere. It was used to recruit soldiers and to gain the trust of the general public so that they could help support the war effort. The art of propaganda was established in posters and print. This was the first war to exploit the key medium of film, from newsreels to fictional dramas and comedies, but also the use of animation. Until 1940, animation production formed a relatively humble part of the film industry. But during this period, production increased for short theatrical releases that entertained, informed, and mobilized partisanship of the general audience. Animation was also produced for a more specific audience, the armed services. The diversity of film outputs for the services demonstrated the capabilities of the medium. Short films were made to provide training and to entertain. This period was a pivotal moment in the American animation industry, enabling it to increase production, demonstrate its versatility, develop enduring animated film stars, and become a profitable sector of the industry. In America, during the rise of Hitler, there were pro-Nazi and pro-Hitler groups, one known as the American-German Bund, run by self-proclaimed American Führer Fritz Kruhn. He held an enormous rally at Madison Square Garden in New York City in 1939. The Bund used banners showing the Nazi swastika next to images of George Washington, who the Bund claimed to be America's first fascist. The US government didn't want these groups to rise in power and influence the American general public, just as Hitler had with Europe. In 1942, the US government hired Disney to make 32 short animated films which include Education for Deaf. This commission by the government directly saved Disney from bankruptcy after the failure of the 1940 film Fantasia. The American government didn't want the American-German Bund to become any stronger or be a mirror of what was happening in Europe. So they needed to find ways to sway the general public away from pro-Nazi and Hitler groups in many ways as they could. I think animation and film was a good focus to take using household names such as Disney and Warner Brothers. The animated short Education for Deaf will be the main focus of my video essay. The film shows a young German boy called Hans and his journey through Nazi-controlled life from the point of view of an American narrator. The short is based on a non-fiction book of the same name by American author Gregor Zima. The short shows how innocent children are educated for war from a very young age, starting by being taught fairy tales twisted by the Nazi regime to show Adolf Hitler as the saviour of Germany, to progressing in their education to become fully fledged Nazi soldier robots, doing only as the Reich asks. For this essay, I'll be talking about how Hitler was portrayed through animation. I will talk about the design and movement of the characters and the similarities they share from film to film and studio to studio, how this reflects on their character and the personality they have in each film. In Education for Deaf, Hitler appears a few times, once in the twisted telling of Sleeping Beauty as the knight in shining armour, and again as a painting idolised by the children, which changes depending on the emotions as the main character Hans is feeling and thinking. In the telling of Sleeping Beauty, the knight in shining armour charges in on his noble steed, fighting off and defeating the wicked witch. By knowing the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty from childhood, you believe the knight in shining armour is the good guy. You can relate to the story, but then you find out that in this telling of the tale, the knight is Hitler. This makes the audience feel like the story is wrong or mistold, and you question the version you were told growing up. This shows how easily brainwashing of the German children by the Nazi Party was. Hitler in this part of the film is shown in big-chested armour with skinny arms. I believe Disney did this to show that really Hitler was a small weak man with this tough shiny exterior. But we have to remember this film is American propaganda for the American general public to show Hitler is not who he says he is. This can be seen today in political cartoons of Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Throughout this film, there are small moments aimed to remind the audience that Hitler is not a knight in shining armour that has come to save the day, but an evil, crazy man. This is shown by him growing devil horns. This communicates the idea that Disney are trying to plant their own opinion of Hitler through animation. So, by having these little digs at Hitler, it shows he isn't this all-powerful being. I think this helps sway people away from following the Nazi regime in America, possibly helping win the war on a cultural level. Remember, the overall goal of this propaganda is to gain control over the American people. From here, Disney makes Hitler get more and more frantic in his rants to Princess Germania, yet she only falls deeper and deeper in love with him. Hitler starts to snort and his arms' movements become more and more exaggerated. Clearly a dig at Hitler's speech-giving techniques and the use of gesticulation. Hitler is shown struggling to lift the whole weight of the princess. I think this shows that the princess represents Germany and the colossal task he has taken on. Princess Germania could also represent Europe and the weight that is now over Hitler and the struggles that he will face. Disney wasn't the only animation studio that was making propaganda animation during the war. Many others had their own depictions of Hitler. In comparison, Warner Bros. Ducktales follows a duck Hitler born from a black egg, who takes over a farmyard which represents Europe. Duck Hitler is shown to be born evil from birth. I think this is meant to show that Hitler was always evil. It was in his blood, not just a collection of events in his life that made him who he was. The other ducks follow Duck Hitler blindly, all lining up to do the goose step for Duck Hitler. One similarity between the films is Warner Bros. Also focused on Hitler's use of gesticulation in his speeches. Disney also used caricature methods on Hitler's physical features, as so did many other animation studios. In the short films, Hitler always had a big nose, normally red in colour. I think this may be a bit of irony from Disney's point of view, as one of the main features the Nazi Party used for identification of the Jewish people was that they have a very prominent nose. Yet Hitler had quite a prominent nose himself, so by focusing on his nose in the animated shorts, it shows Hitler and the Nazis as quite hypocritical of their own policies. This is only my personal opinion that I have acquired through my research. It is much more likely to be for artistic effect. The second version of Hitler in Education for Deaf is similar, but I would say slightly less Disney. They have made the nose a bit smaller and Hitler is smiling. This may be because he is being shown as the perfect Hitler, or the godlike Hitler, that all the children pledge to every morning. The only other time Hitler is seen in the short is of him looking happy, when Hitler is pleased with the children, then angry at Hans for not being a good Nazi. I think Hitler in this scene is not only seen as a godlike figure but a fatherly figure as well, that the children don't want to disappoint or let down, leading to them becoming more and more brainwashed and Nazified. The other features studios focused on, and still do today, are Hitler's infamous toothbrush moustache and undercut hairstyle. The toothbrush moustache was very popular in the 19th century, with many men sporting the tiny tash, including famous comedians Charlie Chaplin and Oliver Hardy. Many people believe that Hitler was inspired by Chaplin, but this is false. Even though he was a big fan of his work, Hitler acquired the toothbrush while serving in World War I, when he was ordered to shorten his larger moustache so that he could get a tighter, cleaner fit when using his gas mask. Charlie Chaplin used the moustache to his advantage when he portrayed Hitler in The Great Dictator. In Education for Deaf and many other films like Ducktales, Hitler's moustache and haircut are a big part in showing Hitler's emotions. For example, in Education for Deaf, when Hitler gets angry, his moustache and hair become pointy and unkempt, making him look almost insane, possibly showing that he is a madman, and he often had fits of rage and even tantrums like a child. In Ducktales, the same actions are used when Duck Hitler gets beaten up by the Dove of Peace. Hitler has two spoken parts in Education for Deaf. Once within the Sleeping Beauty scene, Hitler's voice in this scene is quite animal-like. He snorts and growls as he gets more and more angry at Princess Germania. think this was used to make Hitler seem less human and more demon or animal-like. The second time is of a silhouetted version of Hitler, shown from an extreme low camera angle, to show his power amongst the Nazi soldiers. Here they took a segment from a real-life Hitler speech and re-recorded it for cinematic purposes.
Pride. Today we own Germany. Tomorrow, the whole world.
This is quite a powerful scene, using the actual words of Hitler while surrounded by soldiers and burning torches. The camera angle makes it look like he is standing on top of the soldiers. This shows dominance and that Hitler had unlimited control and power over his followers. Anything he says is seen as truth. Disney have gone from one extreme to another in this film, from lightheartedly making fun of Hitler at the start to a serious portrayal of Hitler, showing him as evil and menacing. In comparison, Duck Tater's use of voice for Hitler Duck takes more of a comedic role.
Vergiss nicht, you dopes! Ich bin der abgeblossene Fresh in Deutschland, in alle Europa, ja in der ganzen Welt! My mother done told me. Say
During Hitler Duck's speech, there is a mixture of German and Westernized language. For example, Hitler Duck says "you dope," as well as a subtle reference to the lyrics "My Mama Done Told Me" from the song Blues in the Night. This sounds like very subtle nonsense, but this can be seen as a direct reference to Hitler's regime, also being to some people nonsense. Unrelated to Hitler, but still relatable to voice, and I would say an important moment in Duck Taters that could be easily looked over, is when all the geese and ducks are lined up saluting, shouted "Sieg Heil," and the camera comes to a smaller black duck who says, "Sieg Heil, boy, I'm from South Germany."
Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil, boy! I'm from South Germany. Sieg Heil!
This joke is ironic in many ways. Firstly, they poke fun at the Nazis, but also poking fun at the people of America. People from South Germany were seen as rural hicks, or hillbillies, much like the American counterpart. The little black duck uses a deep South accent. They were also seen as dumb or uneducated. But the duck contradicts the Nazi policy as they didn't allow black people in their ranks. In conclusion, I believe Hitler was portrayed in animation differently, depending on the studio and the audience the animation was for. Sometimes the animation showed Hitler as someone to laugh at, sometimes they showed him to be someone to be feared. But they all followed a similar design and characteristics. Sometimes these portrayals I think were accurate, but sometimes I think they were not. Hitler was an evil man, but I think he was a very clever man. He had power to influence people with a single speech. Disney's Education for Deaf is a biased American animation to show the American public what Germany under Nazi rule was like. Even though it had quite comedic moments, it had a very dark and serious undertone. Hitler was shown as someone to laugh at for the audience, but worshipped by German children in the film. I think the message of Education for Deaf was that if the Nazis are allowed to continue, then this will happen to your children. Warner Brothers Duck Taters took a very different approach to the portrayal of Hitler, as they showed him as a duck rather than a human. The characteristics of Hitler Duck were similar to that of Education for Deaf, with Hitler's duck's physical features and use of gesticulation. The setting in which they showed him worked very well also. Using a farmyard to represent Europe worked really well. It is also believed that Duck Taters was an influence for George Orwell's book Animal Farm. Duck Taters was much more comedic, possibly for a younger audience of that era. All the films I've looked at have differences mainly because of audience or studio, but when portraying real life people such as Hitler, there are restrictions in design, but I think the studios each found ways to make their portrayal unique and interesting.